Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr for our instant reaction show from Ohio State's 38-25 win at Penn State. Tom, a pretty odd score, but there's always odd scores with these two teams, and there's 2-point conversions missed, there's extra points missed, there's field goals, whatever. Just another odd score between these two teams, but Ohio State covered, looked dominant, probably should have won by, I don't know, a lot more than they did tonight. Maybe let up a little offensively and then defensively gave up some yards and some points in the passing game in the second half, but overall, still pretty dominating effort.
Yeah, it was a pretty thorough win, I would say, on both sides of the ball. The offense looked for long stretches of the game like it could do more or less whatever it wanted to. Like you want to throw deep to Chris Olave, yeah, that's fine. You can do that. You want to do something real crazy. You want to have a tight end catch not one but two touchdown passes in one game. Like, yep, sure, absolutely. Anything is possible in this magical land of Beaver Stadium, and then it was like all of a sudden like, oh, they just seemed like they eased off just a little bit, and that was enough to completely swing things back the other way. But what I wrote about after the game was every time it looked like Penn State was like, oh, maybe they've got something here, immediately Ohio State answered it. It was just like they just went right down the field. Like, you just sort of got the sense that whenever Ohio State needed to score, they could score. Like, every time they needed an answer, they had the answer. And when you see that, it sort of makes you think this probably was true whenever. They if they had really kept the pedal down, they probably could have hit 50 tonight without too much sweat.
We can stick with the Ohio State offense here because 3rd and 8 doesn't seem like anything. It's not a 3rd and long down. Like 3rd and long for Ohio State is probably 3rd and 12 and beyond. It feels like, and anything under that, it doesn't really seem like much of a concern. Especially if you get to within like 4th or 1, 4th or 2, then Day's probably going to go for it. If it's on his like within the their own 40 and beyond, he'll look to go for it. And it's just so impressive to watch when Penn State, it's not like Justin Fields had a bunch of time, but he had enough time and was as accurate as he always is. Well, that's not true. He was not nearly as accurate as he was last week, because this week he was only 28 of 34 for 318 yards with 4 touchdowns. So he had 6 times as many incompletions as he did last week. So I don't know that we want to go overboard in praising how well he played. But this offense right now, and so they rush for 318, or they pass for 318, rush for 208. Whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. The running game was better this week, but I don't know how you stop this passing game. And right now it's just Fields, Olave, and Wilson, because that's all they need. Like, what happens when, all right, now it's time to get Jameson Williams involved? He had a couple of catches. Jeremy Rucker had 4 catches. So they're actually starting to involve other guys. And right now, I think every game moving forward, especially considering this was the toughest one, it seems like as long as Justin Fields has time, you can't do anything about it.
Well, and that was one of the things Ryan Day talked about after the game was, if you have one guy, if it's like, oh, we have this one really good receiver, you can key on that receiver. I mean, you saw that a little bit with Penn State in the first half, it felt like, where Ohio State seemed very focused on stopping Pat Fryermuth. And they pretty much stopped Pat Fryermuth. I think he had 1 catch for 9 yards or something in the first half. He was not, he was essentially not a factor in the first half. And, in the second half, they spread the ball around, and Jahan Dotson kind of got loose and had a heck of a second half. But, with Ohio State, he said, Ryan Day said, you can't just say, oh, well, it's 3rd down. Let's double Chris Olave, or let's spy Justin Fields. Because if you double Chris Olave, they have a bunch of other wide receivers who are extremely talented. And if you spy Justin Fields, well, Garrett Wilson's just going to run a drag across the middle, and then your linebacker's not covering Garrett Wilson, and then you've got a first down that way. They have a bunch of ways to do it. And the offensive line is moving Penn State off the ball enough that they could run the ball. They didn't. I think I would have to go back and listen to our pregame show, but I think I remember saying something about, if they can run for 4.5 yards a game, they'll probably win by a couple touchdowns. Well, they ran for 4.6 yards per game or per rush, and ended up with a 13-point win. Which, yeah, I'm going to give myself full credit for that. Maybe I'm being a little generous, but I'm going to give myself full credit for that.
They only in that average came way down in the fourth quarter when they're just trying to run the clock. They were 1.5 yards per carry in the fourth quarter on 15 attempts, and I think the other three quarters are probably closer to 6 yards a carry, if not more. And maybe the most impressive part of that, Justin Fields wasn't part of any of it, really. Like, there's only maybe there's a sneak in there. He was sacked twice. He finished with six carries for 6 yards, and really, he was not – they didn't need him like they did last week to get the running game going, because the offensive line was different this week. They were more determined with the run game. They were getting a push. Master Teague was getting yards. Trey Sermon was getting yards. They didn't even need to see Steel Chambers this week because things are working, so they didn't even have to go to Justin Fields in that running game. But overall, real quick back to the passing game, Garrett Wilson, 11 catches for 111 yards on 14 targets. Chris Olave, 7 for 120 on 8 targets. That's 22 targets for those guys, 18 completions. And that's some efficiency you can win with. And you felt bad for the Penn State secondary because there's just not a lot you can do. I guess what you can do is like try to hit them after they catch it and hurt them. And like it worked last week with Chris Olave, knock him out of the game. But there aren't very many answers. And then when they're running the ball like they were able to, Master Teague finishes with 110 yards on 23 carries, with a 31-yarder in there. Trey Sermon was doing well as well. And it really just brings the entire thing together. Because I think Ohio State would have been able to throw the ball enough to come away with a win, but it would have been closer. Or maybe not. Maybe if you just throw it up and, maybe not. But like they will be able to beat teams without running the ball as well as they did tonight. But anytime you get 200 yards against the Penn State defense, you've controlled the ball, you've controlled the clock, you've controlled the game, and that's what this offensive line and the running game did.
Well, they have a bunch of teams coming up where if they don't run the ball, they can still win comfortably. They will probably not have another game where they have to be able to run the ball. I mean, maybe Indiana, maybe, and maybe Michigan, maybe the Big Ten championship. But you're going to have to be able to run the ball at least as well as they ran it tonight when you get into New Year's Day. Like 2021 is going to be a year when they're going to have to run the football at least for the first 15 days or so of the year if they want to get to the point that they want to get to. You can't be one-dimensional against an Alabama. You can't be one-dimensional against a Clemson. You can't be one-dimensional against whoever that fourth team is going to be in the hypothetical playoff. They're going to have to be able to run the ball. And I think what we saw tonight is they probably can. No, they weren't. This was not a completely dominating run performance, but it was. This was. The way college football coaches talk about balance. Balance is not 250 yards rushing and 250 yards passing. Balance is when you want to rush, you can rush. When you want to pass, you can pass. And you have both of those, kind of weapons at your disposal. And that's what Ohio State had tonight. They weren't, it was 318 yards of passing and 208 of rushing. And if you look at a yards per play thing, like obviously the passing is much more, 11.4 per reception and 4.6 on the ground. But they could do what they wanted to do in both areas. When they were trying to kind of grind the clock down, they could run it. Even when Penn State seemed like they really knew they were going to be running the ball, they could still run it. And I mean, you obviously didn't see them stopping Ohio State's passing attack very much. There were a couple, I think at least a couple of the incompletions that Justin Fields threw tonight were balls that were at least, hit wide receivers' hands in the end zone, so 28 of 34, and a couple of those could have also been touchdowns. Like, yeah, that's not bad.
Trey Sermon and Master T combined for 36 carries for 166 yards. That's below 5 yards a carry, but when you have that many carries, that says you're moving the chains and you're getting enough out of it. I don't think 4.8 or 4.7 yards it's not good. Sometimes it's good enough, and that's what it was tonight. I think my biggest problem is when you have a guy averaging 62 yards a carry and you only give him one carry. Come on, Tom. That's mismanagement.
That was the first play of the game. That was just that end around to Garrett Wilson, and I wanted to ask Ryan Day about it. And then Ryan Day was in a big darn hurry to get on the airplane, which I understand that. I can get it, but yeah, it was that first play of the game. They hit that end around to Garrett Wilson, and it was just like, oh well, that set a tone right there. Like that was a statement. Like first play, and normally you'd have the whiteout crowd going insane, and it was like they hit that play, and then 2 plays later or 3 plays later, they're in the end zone. And it's like, well, whether there were 107,000 people or not, it would have been real quiet in here at this exact moment, no matter whether this was a normal year or not. And that was just kind of how it was all game for the Buckeyes. Like every time, you kind of in your mind had this, oh man, Penn State scored and this place would be going nuts if, because the fans would be thinking, oh, we're back in it. And every time you had a situation like that, Ohio State just went right down the field and just knocked them back down to the canvas again.
Yeah, and if anybody listening or watching has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we can get to those. The confidence that Ryan Day has in Justin Fields, the one drive in particular, where they threw the ball twice on 4th and 1, and Day said after the game that it's nerve-wracking, but the thing is, if you execute it in practice and it works and then you put it in the game plan, you have to use it. And he said it doesn't make it easy to use, but because you saw how effective they were, the one to Chris Olave and then the last one to, I believe, Jeremy Ruckert. Clearly, you're not expecting – a defense can't expect – the play action, and then I'm going to throw the ball like 20 yards downfield to a guy who is, has defenders near him. But that's just the immense amount of confidence that Ryan Day has in not just Justin Fields and not just Chris Olave to get the right depth, to get, to get the right spot, the offensive line, those tackles. I'm trying to imagine like John Cooper having that kind of confidence in Kirk Herbstreit or Kent Graham. And then if they call that play, just people just tearing out their eyeballs at like, what are you doing? Just give it to the fullback like we're supposed to. But just having that ability, that confidence, and then being able to execute it, that's a special quarterback. It's a special connection that Ryan Day has with his quarterback. And then, it doesn't hurt to have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there bailing you out on your terrible throws.
Yeah, terrible throws that are like on this side of their head as opposed to this side of their head. Justin, what went wrong on that throw? Like you were upwards of 6 inches off. Yeah.
I've got 2 questions. First of all, how dare you?
Dave's quote as he was talking about that 4th down play. He said, I think I needed a drink after that drive. Like, yep. Yeah. And he said, they practice it. He has tremendous faith in them. And then still, like, the ball goes up in the air. And he said his heart was in his throat. Like, it just, you can be as confident as you want. There is just, the things can go wrong sometimes. Like, a defensive lineman could just get his hand up, like, and just tip the ball like something. Now, as we saw last week against Nebraska, that doesn't necessarily preclude the wide receiver from catching the ball on a 4th down. Garrett Wilson caught a tipped pass on a 4th down last week in Columbus. So I think Ryan Day has an incredible amount of confidence in his whole offense right now. And you look at it and you look at kind of the whole, just as a unit altogether, it's like, yeah, why wouldn't he? He has running backs who can, if it's 4th and short, he's got running backs who can move, Master T can move the pile. He has an offensive line that is moving people off the ball, like was really moving people off the ball tonight. He's got an incredibly accurate quarterback who can, make plays, who he also knows he can trust to not make bad decisions. And he's got wide receivers who catch everything. Like, yeah, that's, I'm sure every other coach in the country is, at least every other coach in the league is looking at that and going, oh yeah, it's so easy for you to do it, Ryan Day. Like, sure, everyone would be as brave as Ryan Day if they had Justin Fields and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And yeah, I mean, yeah, but he's doing, he is showing them that he has the faith in them to do it. He is, now he had a field goal that he kicked in the first half that I strenuously objected to on Twitter, and probably objected to more strenuously in my head than I did on Twitter. And then he kicked another one in the second half. It was like, why do you keep doing that? You have the guy, all of the guys who are really good and can do things, like they're still on your team, and you have a backup kicker in there. We can talk about Blake Caldwell in a minute, but had a backup kicker in there and an injured kicker on the first one, and it was like, I don't quite understand being conservative, but he those plays stand out because he has really not been conservative. He has been very aggressive of going for it on 4th and 1, 4th and 2, even in his own end, which is statistically the right play. But it always seems shocking because it's like no one makes the right play. Everyone plays everyone does it safe, because if you punt on 4th and 1 in your own end, no one asks you a question. Mm-hmm. If you go for it on 4th and 1 and you throw a pass and it's incomplete, then you get a bunch of questions, and they're questions that they're probably framed politely during the press conference, but they're not being framed politely in living rooms all across the state of Ohio at the same time.
Yeah, that was it was 14-3 when he decided to kick the field goal from the 3-yard line, and it was a miss at that point. And I tweeted that sometimes when the coach lets off the gas like that, the players do as well. And I think we saw some of that. They were 3 of 6 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They missed 2 field goals from very short, both inside the 10-yard line, that he thought maybe just go ahead and throw a dagger and just go ahead and make it 21-3 and then go from there, and then you'll be fine. The last play, no, second to last play of the first half, we should probably talk about. There was 2 seconds on the clock. It's 4th down. Ryan Day, first of all, I don't think he was calling timeouts that possession during defense to like try and score. I think they wanted to set up a punt block, and I think we saw that, and they didn't get to it. And so it's like I have no problem with them, I guess, not trying to score at that point. But so it's 4th down. There's 2 seconds left. Justin Fields takes the snap, takes a couple of steps back, takes a knee, and I'm watching it. And I tweeted out that, they might want to look at this because there was like a second left when he took a knee. And I don't know how, unless it was like 2.99 seconds on the clock, like it had just gone down to 2. But then, as Ryan Day said, perfect Ryan Day stuff, saying like after the game, like, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to say anything about it. And then he proceeds to say a lot about it. And first of all, he said it's the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced. He also said, well, I could just read it here. It's, when there was 2 seconds on the clock, we just took a long knee, probably took 4 seconds off the clock. So it was completely mismanaged. I don't know what to say, but I'd rather not get into it. We'll figure it out later. Once it happened, we just had to move on and put it behind us because nothing we can do at that point. I mean, there's 2 seconds on the clock. We take the snap, and Justin waits, and then takes a knee. I don't know how that took 1 second, so I still don't know. They said it came down from replay, and that's all I know. So I don't know what to say. It was obviously extremely frustrating, but another thing that we just overcame. There's 4 seconds left, then we probably would have either punted or done something else. And then, but I don't want to say anything. And that dude was not happy.
He was not real happy, and that was one of those things. My initial reaction on that was, you're kind of putting yourself in that position where you're putting yourself in a spot where if the clock operator intentionally or unintentionally starts the clock a little late, or it's 2.99 seconds, and you have no idea what, whether it's 2.99 or 2.01, you're putting yourself in a position where the matter of 1 second can hand the other team a possession. Like, if Justin Fields, steps out and just heaves a ball downfield, runs out of the pocket and throws it out of throws it out of bounds, so you don't get called for grounding. The ball's in the air. That's the old Texas Nebraska play where unless the ball hits the railing with 1 second left, like you're fine. Like, just throw it into the stands, get out of the tackle box, throw it across the line of scrimmage, throw it into the stands, and you're fine. There's a bunch of ways. Or run a play, like snap the ball with 4 seconds left and run a play. Justin Fields can throw the ball 60 yards down the field. Give your players a chance to make a play. I mean, there's a bunch of ways you could have done that differently that would have had a lot more upside than potentially, taking a knee and, putting it in the hands of other people. So, ultimately, yes, it was, you looked at it and it was like the play clock, the play clock and the game clock are going at the same time. And it's like the play clock is ticked off more than 1 second and the game clock is, yeah. So it was one of those things where it was obviously not Brian Day's fault that the clock did not start on time, but also they put themselves in the position where 1 second of slow clock start could hand the other team possession and a field goal try. And, there's just don't, if this year has taught us anything, friends, it's control the things that you can control. And Ohio State had a way to control that and not put that in the hands of a clock operator. And they chose not to do that. And so then when that happens, sometimes, lesson number 2 we've learned this year, sometimes things don't go great. Sometimes things don't go perfectly when things are out of your control. So control what you can control and leave as much that is not in your control, trying to eliminate as much of that uncertainty as you can.
And then, Tom, speaking of control, the Ohio State defensive line, I thought, was fantastic. Talking about Jonathan Cooper, Zach Harrison getting in there, Tommy Togiai with 3 sacks, which a couple of those were just from Pete Werner, like smashing up in there on blitzes and freaking out Sean Clifford and forcing him to just run into somebody else. And Tyler Friday was in there. He had some plays. Tyreek Smith had some pressure. Haskell Garrett, again, was great. Even Jerron Cage had a play where he stopped a guy for 1 yard. It was just a really – Jean-Baptiste had a sack from, I think, a pressure from maybe Haskell Garrett. And it was just a really good collective effort. Held Penn State to, I think, 44 yards rushing on 27 carries, I believe. But we talked to Jonathan Cooper after the game. I asked him if it was his best game ever, because to me it was. And he's only credited with 5 tackles and a half a sack. But he disrupted that entire game from the outset. I mean, he had some bull rushes that you don't see from him because he's always just been the speed rusher. But, he controlled his area. He blew up so many of those meshes. Like he was making Sean Clifford hold the ball so long on those reads, and that allowed the linebackers to get ready to tackle whomever had the ball. And I just thought it was really, really good effort by the entire defensive line. And I tweeted out that Tommy Togiai was basically a quarterback spy, because there are times where he's just kind of waiting for Sean Clifford to appear somewhere after somebody else chases him, and then he takes him down. I was really impressed. They controlled the game. And those passing yards in the fourth quarter by Penn State, I mean, credit John Dotson, but it's not like Sean Clifford had a bunch of time. They were throwing some quick passes, but overall, I thought the defensive line controlled this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that to me was the story of the game on the Ohio State defensive side of the ball. Was just Penn State could do nothing. I mean, we came into the game talking about, they got to really be careful with Sean Clifford running the ball. Sean Clifford's running stats: 18 carries, total 5 yards, 0.3 yards per carry. So 0.3 yards is about hold your hands. Remember the famous picture of Jim Harbaugh holding his hands apart after the 2016 game? Yeah, about like that. Yeah, that is about as far as Sean Clifford went on his average carry, and the long was 11. And we talked about don't let it was big for Ohio State not to let Sean Clifford run for 7 yards on 3rd and 6. You keep Penn State, limit them to keep when you have a chance to get them off the field when they're behind the sticks, you get them off the field. Penn State finished at 3 for 9 on 3rd downs. That is what it looks like when you get Penn State off the field when you have an opportunity. That just they did all the stuff they needed to do, and this was a great object lesson in exactly how important it is to control the line of scrimmage, because Ohio State had the line of scrimmage on offense and Ohio State had the line of scrimmage on defense. And Penn State has some weapons. I mean, Pat Frymuth is a weapon. John Dotson is a weapon. John Dotson had a big second half, but he didn't do anything in the first half. And the reason is there was just they couldn't get him the ball because there was just constantly pressure in Sean Clifford's face. And Sean Clifford was running for his life a huge part of the night. And, that's something that kind of snowballs on itself, because you can start the night getting pressure, and then once you've gotten hit as much as Sean Clifford got hit, Sean Clifford got pounded all night. And by about the third quarter, like, even when there's not someone there, you're like, crap, there might be someone there. And you start, there were a couple of times when it seemed like he might have had a sort of clean pocket, maybe heard some footsteps, and then might have run himself into trouble somewhere else. And then he gets hit again. Like, Sean Clifford is going to need some Advil tomorrow morning. That was a rough day. And I mean, credit to him. He hung in there all game. He played the full 60 minutes. There was one play where he lost his helmet and Will Levis to come in. Other than that, he played the whole game. So no, yeah. he played hard. But I mean, when you don't have time, when a quarterback doesn't have time, and the running game doesn't have lanes, like, there's only so much you can do.
You mentioned controlling how important it is to control both lines of scrimmage. Also, Tom, Ohio State controlled the time of possession, 37 minutes. That's also another major important stat. Is that correct?
I didn't even look at that. That is an incredible amount of time of possession for Ohio State. Because
it is.
And okay, again, let's start this with a caveat. Don't ever pay attention to time of possession. It's a stupid, worthless, garbage stat that dum-dums pay attention to. Okay. This is unusual because this is not something that Ohio State normally does. Normally an Ohio State team, what Ohio State, and this is what Ryan Day said at the game, is they look at plays. They don't look at time of possession. They look at plays, how many plays they ran. Now, part of why they had so much time of possession is because they ran 79 plays. That's a lot. That is a lot of plays. They ran 79 plays, and Penn State ran 45. Like, that's really the stat to pay attention to, is the number of the plays you run rather than time of possession. But if you're running 79 plays and the opponent is running 45, I mean, you have almost twice as many opportunities to do something good with the ball. And you're just, Penn State just they never had the ball. They just constantly had, they had 3 and outs. And when they scored quickly. But I'm just going to read down Penn State's drive chart. How many plays? 6, 11. That was the one that ended in a field goal in the first half. 3, 3, 3, 1. That was the weird one before halftime. 8, 4, 5, 7, 1, 7. But there were the couple. They had the 3 touchdown drives in the second half that were 8, 5, 7, and 11. Other than that, it was 6, 3, 3, 3, 1, 4, 1. And then 7 was the very end of the game when the game was already over. Ohio State had 15-play, 89-yard drives, 10-play, 72 yards, 12-play, 75 yards, 12-play, 75 yards, like back-to-back 12-play, 75-yard drives. Like, that's just – if you can't hang on to the ball, if you're going 3 and out and the other team's playing until they got their 12-play drives, number one, they're going to wear your defense out. And number two, like, you can't score if you don't have the ball unless your defense is making it, getting a pick six or something. There's just but the biggest thing is just you get worn out, and we saw I think a little bit of that. Like, just that's part of why Ohio State's defensive line was so dominant was they were fresh all night. They were not getting worn down because they were deep, and they didn't have to have a lot of snaps.
And you didn't really hear much from Penn State's defensive ends who weren't able to rotate like Ohio State's. The coverage of Pat Fryermuth, he finished with 3 catches for 46 yards, had basically one big play, a 19-yarder, where he got kind of matched up with, I think, Tough Borland on a 1st and 20 or something like that, coming out of just a drag route type of thing. But they had Warner on him, they had Baron Browning on him, they had Josh Proctor on him, and so many times it was just they were trying to get it to him on out routes where that's the only place Sean Clifford was looking, and they had it covered. And I thought they did a really, really good job on him and made him basically an average tight end. They shut him down, and then it's up to other players to step up, which Jahan Dotson absolutely did with some ridiculous catches. Made Sean Wade look questionable, but they were also playing off coverage quite a bit. It seemed like there wasn't, there were some slants in there, but you got to give Dotson credit for some of the catches he was making, because it's not like Wade was like terrible. It's just one they were kind of getting physical, and Wade got pushed off a little bit, and that was the one-handed catch. But the one before that, Wade was right there and actually broke up the pass before Dotson brought it back down. So give credit to him for making some plays, and for Clifford just putting it where his receiver could go get it. But overall, like with the linebackers shutting down Freiermuth, I thought, just speaking on the linebackers specifically, this was a better performance, a more versatile performance. They asked him to do more. Pete Werner was blitzing, Baron Browning was rushing off the edge, Tough Borland was doing some things. Justin Hilliard, we know, missed the game for a positive COVID test. Looks like that was a false positive. So should be no concerns of an outbreak at this point. We'll just throw that in there. No big deal. But Craig Young was even in there early on at one point. Just a very good performance from the linebackers. They look so confident and actually pretty fast too.
Yeah, it was an impressive performance overall. I mean, this felt like the Pete Werner game a little bit. Like he just was he was credited with 6 tackles, and it felt like there were probably at least another half dozen times where he was sort of there and maybe pushed push Sean Clifford or push someone else into someone else to make a play. But he had a nice game. There were a couple times when they seemed like they got caught with matchups where I think there was one where Baron Browning was on Freiermuth and they gave up a pass. You mentioned a Borland one, but they did a pretty good job. I felt like keeping guys in good, in places to make good plays. I think Browning got called for a roughing the passer call that was
Yes.
real ticky tack, like real ticky tack. And I mean, honestly, my takeaway from that play was, oh, good for Baron Browning. He got to the quarterback. Like there's a lot of times you can look and it's like, oh yeah, he took, after the guy threw the pass, he took a step and a half and then hit him. Like, okay, yes, that's roughing the passer. Or, he really drove him into the ground. Like that was a pretty soft call. But yeah, no, I think they've got guys in the positions where they can succeed. That Baron Browning, if Baron Browning can be a pass rusher, like that is, that's probably where he should have been all along. And you've got Pete Werner and Tough Borland. I mean, Tough Borland had a nice game against, in run support. Like Tough Borland was one of the big reasons why there was nothing there all night for Sean Clifford in the middle. Like Tough Borland and Pete Werner were just there all night. And Ross Fulton mentioned on Twitter, this is what we'll talk about when I have Ross Fulton on the Morning Scoop later this week. But what they did with the defensive line, to just sort of funnel the players to the linebackers, and then the linebackers are there and just made the tackle. And you didn't have missed tackles. There were a few plays in the where the back seven of the defense where there were some guys who, there were some missed tackles in the back end. But the front seven was very, very, very good tonight.
It was interesting. They would have like Baron Browning and Taraji Mitchell together in like a 3-4 line. They were the two ends on in a 3-man front. and they were the ends giving him a 5-man front, and then like Taraji would just completely like bail out, and they'd have some sort of a zone blitz in there where somebody would come inside. So it's they're using guys in different ways now, and that was something I don't think we've ever seen from Taraji Mitchell, putting him in that position. So just some things to watch there. The secondary is still a concern. We came into this game wondering about the safeties. Now there's questions about the corners. Seven Banks had a rough game. Sean Wade, we just said he had some rough moments. Cameron Brown went down with a non-contact injury that if you pull everybody, I'm guessing 90% would say that, gosh, that looks like an Achilles injury. We're not going to speculate. I'll speculate as much as I just did right there, but that's what kind of went through my mind, just seeing him like that. And, there's no words from Ryan Day afterwards, as you would expect, because he doesn't talk about injuries, but it sure didn't look good. I believe they had to bring the card out for him. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, they brought the card out for him. Yeah, the combination of non-contact injury and bringing the card out is like the middle of that Venn diagram is not great, not good stuff. So yeah, we'll see when we get we'll see if when we get official word he will. I'm guessing he will be listed as out for next week. That may be the next time we hear anything official, but yeah, he will be on the out list for next week. Would be my guess.
Tight end Luke Farrell left the game, limped off. I don't believe he returned, so that will be something worth watching. Blake Hallbill had tweaked his groin pregame, and so that was the issue there. He missed he made the extra point, and then it was Dominic DiMaccio who came out for the kickoff, and you and I are texting back and forth like, what the heck? What's going on here? And then Ryan Day said after the game that it was first of all, he's like, well, I don't really want to get into it, but he tweaked his groin pregame. It's like, hey man, that's all we're asking. That what you just gave us right there. That's all we're trying to figure out. And so that really, I think that those are about the only injury issues right now. But again, I still think there are some questions in that secondary. So is it Tyreek Johnson now that comes in for Cameron Brown? Or do they probably leave Marcus Williamson? Because Cameron Brown comes in a lot in that nickel and plays that slot. So maybe you just leave Marcus Williamson in there longer. They'll have some time to figure it out. They don't have a lot of time, Tom. It's Rutgers week.
The most wonderful week of the year. Yes. Yeah. I'm interested to see what they do with the defense, with the defensive backs. Cause I mean, that's a big hole. That is a spot where they were not real deep. But before there were concerns at defensive tackle, there were the cornerback rotation was kind of the big question. And now you've lost one of those three guys, and you sort of came into the year with like, yeah, they've got three guys they should feel pretty okay about, and then behind them it's kind of like question mark, question mark, question mark. Well, now some of those question marks move up the depth chart, so they're gonna have to figure that out. And you have a couple weeks to figure that out. You've got Rutgers, you've got Maryland. Those are not teams that are going to really push Ohio State's defense too much. But Indiana can do some stuff, and that's 3 weeks away. They need to have some answers before then, and then you need to have some answers before Michigan, and then you get into the Big Ten championship game in the playoff. You definitely need to have some answers before you get into the playoff. So.
Lathan Ransom was playing late. I'll have to check out that again to see what was going on with that. If he was the, I don't know, third safety in some sort of a dime look. I don't know. I'll check that out. Tom, next week, Michigan is at Indiana.
Oh man, that's. I don't know if Michigan being 1-2 or Indiana being 3-0 would be weirder, but. You might get a chance to see both of those things. That's boy. We should probably wrap up relatively soon, but
yes,
that Michigan game today. That was
bad.
I did not see that one coming. That was and I guess that's probably a little bit of perspective on. I'm sure there are people who are looking at this Ohio State game tonight going, yeah, they should have won by a lot more than that. They really left some opportunities on the field. They really didn't play a good complete game, and yet nobody's playing complete games today. Clemson almost lost to Boston College, and it was not all a function of Trevor Lawrence not being there. You had Michigan lost to Michigan State, who lost to Rutgers last week. You go through the country, and it's like, there are three teams that anyone has any reasonable level of confidence in, and it's Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. And Clemson, like I said, almost lost to Boston College today. The fourth team that people probably say more often than not is Georgia, and Georgia won 14-3 against Kentucky. Like that was not real decisive today. Like it's just this is just a weird year. You have in your head like, oh, well, Ohio State should definitely be able to do this, and good teams should definitely be able to do this. There is no, like, this is not normal. This is not. Don't go based off of history. Like this is just going to be a weird year. Ohio State is probably going to have a game against a team that they're favored by 4 touchdowns against. That's close in the third quarter. Like that's probably just going to happen just because this is just a weird year. And just you just reach the point of acceptance, and you will enjoy this football season a lot more. It's just, I mean, you're seeing it everywhere else. There's no reason that Ohio State would be exempt from that.
Yeah, I had an NFL scout in my DMs. Like, is that all Ohio State has? Is Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave? And I responded, "That's. Do they need anything? Do they need anybody else?" And he's like, "They will against Clemson and Alabama." And my response was, "Have you watched Clemson and Alabama this year? I don't see a whole lot of defense there either." So
Yeah.
I think it is more than just those two, but I think those two will be okay. But as you said, Tom, it's 1:30. We could probably wrap up this show. Unless you have any last thoughts, any final message, any Jerry Springer final thoughts.
No, I think my final thought was what I shared before. Like this is just going to be a weird year. Just accept the fact that this is going to be a weird year, and there will be something in the next month that just absolutely infuriates you. And like, I mean, Indiana having a lead in Ohio Stadium in the second half,
Mm.
well within the realm of possibility. Like well within the realm of possibility. Just, and you know what? That happened in a normal year. That happened in 2014. Indiana had the lead in Ohio Stadium in the third quarter, maybe even the early fourth quarter, and then what, 1, 2, 3, 4 games later, that Ohio State team was a national champion. Like these things happen. Like just do not get infuriated. Things for Ohio State are going pretty darn well right now, and they're not going to face too many like real stiff challenges now. They cleared one of the biggest hurdles they had to clear all year, and they cleared it with ease tonight, and did it without looking particularly great in some ways. So I would think Ohio State fans should be feeling pretty good about things right
You can say what you want about Indiana, but Xander Diamont is not coming through that door.
now.
Okay, so we'll end it there, Tom. I want to thank you guys who stayed up to watch and to listen. We do appreciate that. And for those of you who are listening to this Sunday morning, go get bent. You should have been up here. You should, if we had to be up late, you should be up late. So begrudgingly, I also thank those people. Tom, you also thank those people. But you don't need to because I just did it for you. So we'll go ahead and end it. Tom's got to go. Mark is outside, probably in the car, like waiting. Like
Honking the horn.
But we'll go ahead and end it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. We will talk to you guys, Tuesday? Tuesday sometime after we speak with maybe just Ryan Day, because it's a day off for the players so that they can go and vote. So we'll end it there. Thanks. And finally, I'm just going to say goodbye. All right. Have a good one. Talk to you all later.